Welcome to Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, a Dark Sun podcast. I'm your host, Robert.
And I'm Jesse.
We're back talking about and breaking down adventures.
That's right. Today we're talking about Merchant House of Amketch.
Before we jump into the adventure, let's talk about Dark Sun news.
All right. We got a lot of news this time. So there's a Thri-kreen of Athas album that has just come out with a song for each Thri-kreen subtype. It's on darkenwood.bandcamp.com/album/Thri-kreen of Athas with hyphens all throughout. So this, what can you say? A few episodes ago, we did a review of the Thri-kreen of Athas source book, and now you've got ambient music that you can use themed to each of the different types of Thri-kreen. Like, this would be perfect if you're planning to use Thri-kreen raiders in an encounter or something, and you want to have them be a recurring threat. And now you've got a specific song type, a leitmotif, if you will, for the Jaral or the Toksa or whatnot, and the players can know, oh, it's these guys again.
Yeah, so this actually isn't new. It's actually a couple years old, but I just stumbled upon it the other day. So that's why I added it, because I don't think I'd ever seen it before.
Well, it was new to me, so
Yes, for sure.
I'm counting it as new news.
There you go. Let's see. Dungeon Crawler Audio. They've put out a couple of really great pieces of ambient music. They did a bunch of tracks for the Deadlands, and so that's really fantastic if you just want some background, both for your game, or sometimes I just listen to it, when I'm doing pretty much anything, but prepping especially. But this one is called Defiling Sorcery, and so it's got some kind of crazy noises, although still ambient, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, and as usual, we'll have the link to that in our show notes. But man, it's always cool to have this sort of inspirational music that you can add that really gives an emotional vibe, cadence to the game. We used it when we did Fallout. They had interesting music in the Dark Sun Shattered Lands video game, and,
Mm-hmm.
and really sort of raised the level of the game by giving you an emotional tenor for your players.
Yeah, we've got more Dark Sun music later, but for now, let's go to athos.org news. So our last episode 28 with Tony DiCilisi, in support of that, he released a couple of higher resolution versions of some of his Dark Sun art. One of them is featuring a Braxat in an interesting pose, and then there are a couple of sketches and the final work from Elves of Athos.
Yeah, if you haven't heard this podcast, folks, you did a great job, sir, interviewing Tony, and super exciting. You can find all of this work on Tony's Twitter account, which we'll put in the show notes. The Braxet is pretty hilarious, and it's very cool to see him sort of retouching and revisiting these pieces of Dark Sun history.
Yeah, and I'm gonna boast of it for a minute. So during our conversation with Tony, I was like, hey, if you have any pieces of art, I'm sure people would buy prints or whatever. And then he's like, what's your address? I'll send you some. And so he sent me this Braxat print and the Water Hunters print, the color Water Hunters print. Yeah, so it's awesome. Wow. So soon when I get back home, I will put those up and take some pictures. I've got a lot of stuff to put up. I've still got the Dark Sun art prints to put up as well. And my kids got me one of the, I think it's Draken, one of the Draken pieces, a 4E piece that I really like, that I got to put up too.
Got a whole Dark Sun museum going on.
I do.
So moving on in the news, we've got the Athasian Survey Project number 17, Altaruk Trade Fortress. This project visits a trade fortress, the Trade Fortress of Altaruk, as it says in the name. Very cool as inspiration for DMs who are looking at, okay, what does a trading outpost look like in the Dark Sun world? Altaruk is kind of the iconic one for the setting. It's close enough to tier in the region that a lot of PCs are going to stop by there. But even if you're playing somewhere way off on the east side of the Tablelands or elsewhere, this can give you sort of an idea of how a trade fortress might be laid out and staffed for your own games.
Yeah, so Altaruk is an interesting place starting from the beginning, I don't know, whenever it was first either described or actually shown in art, it's always different. Like there's always a different layout, there's always a different description of it, and um, in order to sort of bring all of those into alignment for some of the adventures that we're doing for Adventures in the Deadlands, one of them takes you to Alterac, but and the map there has multiple Alteracs on the map. So the idea is that it's right there. It's in the mountains, but it's right there by the Silt Sea. And so the idea is that, giants or other raiders or whatever sort of, semi regularly destroy Alterac. And so like it's got to move to a different location and then get rebuilt again. And so that's the idea, that there's been so many locations because it keeps getting destroyed. I thought that
Yeah,
was pretty,
yeah.
pretty smart.
It's a super cool. It both gives it a story reason for why the place is always looking different and being rebuilt, and it underscores that like there's constantly these threats coming out of the wild on Athos, whether it's like silt tides or raiding Gith or giants or famine or what have you, and you have to deal with these and then you rebuild. And Alterac is constantly rebuilt because it's on an important site, an important trade route, and it needs to be there, and so it gets destroyed and then it gets rebuilt. And that's an interesting metaphor for what PCs are doing in Dark Sun games.
Yeah, for sure. Um, we've also released the Journal of Zong Tosu Entry 5, um, where the Master Halfling Life Shaper from the Rulthon capital of Damasku is sent to investigate a mysterious ring of standing stones, and the strange creatures are said to occasionally appear within, which apparently are spider folk, and they get captured by the spider folk. This is an interesting, this is the fifth one. This one is written by a combination of by Adam Cieslak, June Solar, Azog the Defiler, and John Michelson. And so all of these have been kind of, um, written by groups mostly headed up, I think, by Adam, um, on the Pristine Tower dev group. So I think this is, we other than what is it, the oh geez, Windriders of the Jagged Cliffs, we really haven't gotten anything else about these kind of halflings. So I think it's
Right.
really cool.
Yeah, yeah, because the line ended abruptly very shortly after Windriders came out, and then all we had beyond that was the old internet posts about the messenger, and it's really neat to see this totally different perspective, very, very different from anyone else, experiencing things that might seem somewhat familiar to a Dark Sun veteran. You know, if I say, oh, this is an obelisk where strange creatures come out when the moons align at certain points and then they disappear. Nobody knows where they came from, where they go, or what they're doing. And you probably know where I'm talking about. But now seeing it through the eyes of this life shaper who's got a different perspective, very cool way to put a fresh twist on it. It's
Yeah,
also
sure.
neat that this is all written by a collaboration like that, because each of these people gets to take their ideas and stir them in a pot and get a richer Dark Sun experience out of it.
Definitely.
Um,
Um,
we have another adventure to mention too. Um, Opportunities in Chaos, written by Peter Nuttall, aka the infamous Brax, is being reposted. This adventure is set in the Warrens of Tyr amidst the chaos immediately following Kalak's overthrow and demise. So it's another one of those great sort of intro to the setting, circa Kalak has just been speared. What's happening in the city state when everything is falling to pieces, and how do the PCs take advantage of it or just survive all of the turmoil?
yeah, so I've used this, and actually I just recently used it in, well, I guess not recently. I've continually used it in the last campaign, which was a tier campaign, or is a tier campaign, I should say. Um, and so at the beginning, I used this, and in it there is a defiler named Xantippe, and the characters won, and there is this tower in Grange's ward, and they took over the tower. So they
Hmm.
kicked the defiler out and took it over, and so that's been their base in tier, since they were third level. Now they're 13th level, and They call it the broken portal because the door is broken, and it's kind of looking a little trashed. But they fixed it all up, and like they've put a lot of money into it, and
Very
so
nice.
it's just been a great kind of touch point for the campaign again as a base for them within the city. Um, and just recently, I had a new player actually just a couple nights ago, new player to the game, and so I was like, how do I get them involved? And I got them involved, and then I was like something exciting sort of has to happen. So I had everybody meet up at the broken portal because somebody sent them a message or somebody contacted them telepathically or whatever. They all ended up there one way or another, and then they started saying like, well, you sent me this message, like, why am I here? And then they're like, well, I didn't send you this message, and I didn't send you this
Yeah.
message. So they all get there, and then all of a sudden, it blows up by this huge fireball because one of their enemies is out to get them. And so that was cool because they were just talking about how cool it was and how they fixed up the third floor and everything, and then it all got destroyed.
Mhm.
Well, partially, anyways.
Nice.
They'll fix it up again.
Well, destroyed and rebuilt,
That's right. That's
like we
right.
were just talking about. I love this sort of gameplay where there's so little resource scarcity being such a strong theme in Dark Sun. There's so little that's worth capturing that you get a place and you call it your own and you want to make it safe and you want to build it up and you get the players invested in it and now they
Yeah.
want to put their money and their time into it, but now it matters to them, so then you get to threaten it and they care about it, and they start caring about their neighbors and the people they have to interact with, and the one Templar that's always shaking them down for money, they really hate that guy. It's great drama.
Definitely. Um, we recently posted Excursions Lost Temple of Rahun, a 5e adventure written by June Solar, and it's available in the resources section. The description of it is: a recent sandstorm of epic proportions has shifted the mountainous dunes of the great alluvial sand sea, revealing the temple of the ancients. Can you delve into the ancient ruins in search of riches before the next sandstorm buries them once again?
And a bunch of different GMs have been running this adventure and some of the other excursions through the AthasCon portal that's associated with Athas.org. June Solar's baby to keep hope alive by keeping people playing and running Dark Sun. And Lost Temple of Rahun is the first installment in a series of adventures that sees you recovering some relics from the lost temple in this one, and then returning to the city and dealing with the fallout of people trying to steal some of these relics or finding out that they might hold secrets that are better left buried and whatnot. Totally worth checking out. And even if you don't plan to run it yourself, there are constantly games of this being posted through AthasCon, and there are plenty of opportunities for people to play it. I heartily recommend it. Over
Let's
on the Facebook group, I also, speaking of June Solar, he's running some more stuff at Gamehole Con. So if you want to actually throw dice at a table physically, and you're going to be in Madison, Wisconsin this October, um, he will be running his fifth edition Dark Sun games there and a few others. General registration opened up on July 15th. General registration opened on the July 15th, so there may still be some tickets available by the time that you're hearing our podcast. Um, but he's going to be having tables running Lost Temple of Rahun, Stolen Heritage, which is the follow up, Shards of the Void, Banshee's Wail, which always cool dealing with dwarf banshee plot lines, Expedition to Blighthaven Keep, which is a fun sort of twist on Dark Sun. Doesn't have a lot of dungeons, but now you're going to an old fortress to locate a lost dwarven key, and the Butcher's Promise, which has to do with the infamous Book of Camelot Kings that comes, of course, from the quintet of novels.
Izar bin Yosef posted a great image of a fire drake. Izar works with the Pristine Tower Development Group. He's been doing a lot of great art. This is just some of the stuff that he's been doing. I really like it because it shows like all the prior drawings of the fire drake, and then his version, which kind of tries to bring them all together, which I think he does nicely.
It's a really fantastic image. He's got a nice background of a volcano setting for the fire drake, and it's up on its hind legs as they're seen in some of the other illustrations that we've seen. And he really does get like it's kind of got a T-Rex like head, and it's got fins along the back like Godzilla and a pointed tail, and it's got thumbs like an iguana. Um, It really looks fearsome. I, as a PC, would be terrified to run into this thing, but me as a player, I kind of want a plushie of it.
Definitely. Um, Trevor Rogan of Neuromancy Maps posted a 30 by 40 map of a sand skimmer that he did uh, in support of his Patreon. He's got a couple. Another one was like the Silver Ram or something like that. And that was more one that had sort of wheels instead of the skiffs that this one has.
Yeah, this one's almost more like a hydrofoil, except
Yeah.
on silt instead of water.
Hmm.
Very, very cool for all of your expeditions in the Sea of Silt.
For
Um,
sure.
Over on the Facebook group, there was also a lot of Conan posting recently because who doesn't love Conan if you love Dark Sun? And in honor of all of them, Jack Meyer, aka New Jack, posted a hilarious second edition item, the Loincloth of Gravity Defying +5. It's a highly common garment that's as protective as chainmail, granting AC 5 to the whole body, but it weighs 1 pound, no penalties to any dexterity actions. The loincloth and its accompanying halter, top, or bra are completely indestructible. Not even a wish can destroy them, make holes in them, or peek underneath. So it's totally Comics Code approved, and you can do some interesting things with indestructible materials. And it can only be removed if your character is under partial or full cover. So long as it is worn, it gives your campaign a PG rating. So uh, I feel like this is just sort of in honor of Frank Frazetta. Here is your loincloth. Apply oil. Now go fight something.
Exactly. Moving into actual plays, Blue Box RPG's Sea of Dark Sun has returned after the DM's vacation. There's been 2 episodes since then, The Tattered Flag and Final Rest. In these episodes, the group faces the bandits that killed the Jindra family, which made them ghosts. So you have to tune in to see what happens to those bandits. And
Yeah.
if you like, this is where I was talking about more music. If you like the soundtrack of the Blue Box RPG Sea of Dark Sun, the artist Jeffrey Schumann has released it on YouTube. So it's about a 10 or 12 minute song that really, really just feels like Dark Sun to me. I really like it.
Yeah, really, really nailing the vibe for a good lengthy piece, which is nice and meaty. Mysteries of Athos is a second edition actual play, and they're continuing their story with Balak against the Antloids. You can kind of guess what's happening in that story. And again, we'll have the link in the show notes.
Pigeon 30 Gaming is doing an actual play of Shattered Lands, the original Dark Sun computer game, on YouTube, and we'll throw that link there. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I've been meaning to play that, so maybe I'll play it again here soon.
Yeah, yeah, I was just playing it again recently. Is Pigeon 30 just posting this on YouTube, or are they doing a Twitch and then copying it to YouTube when it's over?
I'm not sure. I just
Hmm.
I just was searching YouTube and found it, so
Bears further investigation.
yeah, I didn't look further to see if they're on Twitch.
Oh, I'll find out. All right. Well, that's the news. Let's move on to the meat of this one, our adventure review of Merchant House of Amketch.
Yeah, and warning, this is going to be full of spoilers. So if you're going to play it, maybe come back and listen after you've played it. But if you're going to be a GM, we'll definitely have some good help for you.
Yeah, spoilers for a 30-year-old game.
You're right. So first, the facts. Merchant House of Amketch dates to 1993, making it midway through the Dark Sun release cycle. It was written by Richard Baker, and he's written a couple more Dark Sun products. He was part of the Dragon's Crown design team, and he did Valley of Dust and Fire for 2nd edition, and he was on the 4th edition design team.
So he's got some serious Kestrel feathers in his cap for Dark Sun design.
For sure.
If you want to read along, you can get the PDF of Merchant House of Amketch on Drive-Thru RPG at a reasonable price. It's billed as an adventure for 4 to 6 players of levels 4 through 7. It's part of its own unconnected set of modules, the DSM series for Dark Sun missions. So this is DSM2, meaning it follows Black Flames, but it's completely unconnected. Each one is a self-contained story.
Physically, as the other adventures of the line up to this point, it comes in this envelope box and flip book format. So it's a slim box with 2 books that are spiral bound and 1 pamphlet inside. The flip books are the usual player's book and dungeon master's book, while the pamphlet is like a storybook, has fiction by Simon Hawke, and a few monster stat blocks for some of the encounters in the adventure. Unlike most of the other adventures, the fiction is not an original story. It's an excerpt from Hawk's Tribe of One series, and it focuses on the elfling Sorak and his introduction to Tyr's gambling scene with a game called Hawk's Gambit that curiously uses all the same dice used in D&D, so you can actually use it as a mini game during your Dark Sun sessions.
Yeah, a very helpful little addition for those lonely caravan trail nights. Um, So, according to Ben Riggs, who wrote Slaying the Dragon, in 93, Merchant House of Amketch sold 11,291 copies versus 11,645 for Black Flames. But both of them were hugely eclipsed by another adventure that Richard Baker contributed to, Dragon's Crown, which sold 61,613 copies in 1993. So, it's clear that Black Flames, a few people bought it, and if you listen to our review of it, they went, there are some issues with this adventure. And then Merchant House of Amketch comes out, and they're kind of like, I don't know. And then a few less people bought it, and then Dragon's Crown comes out and just starts stomping around the landscape because that thing is huge and
Yeah.
is chock full of good stuff, and is one of the really well done adventures of the line. So not a surprise that it really, really topped the sales charts there.
Yeah, it's really great that we have these numbers from Ben Riggs.
Yeah.
The next year I looked at, so that was just the 93 numbers. The 94 numbers showed that Black Flames had about like 65 more sales, and Merchant House of Amketch was actually down like 600. So what they do is, they send out all the product, and then the the store owners can send them back if they don't sell. So that's why there's like a negative amount for 1994. That also tells us that I'm sure some of them, like some of the Black Flames, were returned, but all in all, there was a net of 65 sold for the year.
Yeah, yeah. So anything that stayed on the shelves for over a year, the bookstores are just going to say, "We're sending this back because we don't want to pay taxes on inventory that's not moving off of our shelf." Not a good sign. I
Yeah,
guess that was sort of a sign of things that were coming for TSR at that point.
probably. So let's talk about the premise of the adventure.
Yeah.
The back cover text says, "In the city of Balak, an insidious new threat to the Tyr region has arisen in the shape of a humble beetle. Magically altered to deliver a psionic malady via their bite, the beetles have been used by Templars, slavers, raiders, and worse to neutralize the psionic abilities of their captives and render them docile. In desperation, the Veiled Alliance has called upon your characters to track down the source of the sinister beetles and put an end to them. There's only one problem. The most powerful merchant house of the Tyr region is growing even wealthier from the parasitic trade. Explore the trade routes and intrigues south of the estuary of the Forked Tongue in the heart of the Tyr region. Merchant House of Amketch can be played as a standalone adventure or as a sequel to Black Flames."
Right. And they're not hiding any secrets here about what's going on in the adventure, but it's not like it's going to be a big shock to the players because the way the adventure is structured, the whole mystery comes out pretty early on, and you have a lot of conflicts along the way of trying to resolve it. Um,
Right.
in the adventure details, as sort of an overview, they say that few things in the world of Athos are considered too dangerous to openly trade in. Even the most honest Dune traders occasionally carry contraband, risking heavy fines or imprisonment for the high profits of illicit trade. Now, a new kind of contraband trade has arisen, the trade of shakat beetles. Each beetle is worth 5 silver pieces or even more in the elven markets of the Tyr region. At first glance, shakat beetles are unremarkable little creatures. They're parasites, clinging to animal hosts with powerful claws while they live on their host's blood. The beetles would be nothing more than a nuisance except for the strange effect they have on psionics. Any human or demi-human bitten by a shakat beetle suffers from some strange disorder that makes the use of psionics extremely difficult. The beetles have been turning up in the hands of slavers, assassins, and Templars all over the area. Their unusual psionic draining properties make them very useful for subduing and controlling people who rely on the way. Whew, that's like world's greatest box text. Um, I'm going to pause here to note there's some similarity here to Dragon's Crown, of course, where
Hmm.
the story thread is that someone has a device that has basically turned the off switch for psionic powers throughout the region, just made it very hard for people to use psionics.
Yep.
And this one though is targeted. It's like, oh, there's a specific person that you want to get rid of, and they happen to have psionic defenses. Well, you get your bard to slip one of these beetles into their tent, and then ding, their powers get nullified, and you can do whatever you want to them. So it's interesting to me that Mr. Baker presumably sort of revisited that well of, okay, psychic powers are such a big phenomenon in Athos.
Hmm.
Having the ability to turn that off is a big deal.
Yeah, it was really quite crazy. It goes from, having to be bit by this parasite to just sort of worldwide in Dragon's Crown.
Right. Yeah. And the scope, of course, matches the level because
Right.
this is a much lower level adventure. So it's like, okay, there's a bunch of these beetles being delivered, and you're trying to root them out and destroy the supplier. Illicit arms deal essentially. And then the
Yeah.
higher level one is someone has a psychic nuke and you've got to stop
Right.
them.
So the adventure begins as the player characters are contacted by the Veiled Alliance of the city of Balik. The Veiled Alliance desperately wants to find out where the beetles are coming from and how they can put an end to the illicit trade. The Veiled Alliance has observed the influx of beetles into the black markets and managed to correlate the beetles' appearances with the arrivals of caravans of the House of Amketch. The heroes can solve the puzzle by infiltrating the Amketch caravans. Merchant houses are always looking for capable guards and outriders, and the PCs will have little trouble in joining the Mketch caravan. A few discreet inquiries and a little exploration turn up a secret cache of smuggled beetles aboard the caravan wagon. The master of the caravan, a human trader named Bezrak Sandfist, insists that he has no knowledge of the smuggled beetles. Unfortunately, he is the smuggler, and when the caravan arrives at the Red Obelisk Oasis, Bezrak betrays the heroes and sells them into slavery. Bezrak is actually in the pay of the merchant house Sham, a powerful and decadent house based in Nibene. The heroes learn that he is one of the masterminds behind the smuggling operation, as well as a traitor to House Amketch. With a little luck, the heroes soon escape their incarceration and set out in pursuit.
The trail then leads back into Balak. There, the PCs find that the beetles were loaded onto the caravan by Sham agents working out of the Sham Emporium in the city. The Emporium is well defended, and the Sham agents are after the heroes for interfering in the beetle trade. One more piece of the puzzle is hidden within the Emporium, evidence that the beetles were shipped from the western outpost of Fort Melidor. There is no other supply source for the Shakat beetles. Again, the player characters journey across the desert. At Fort Melidor, they find that the beetles were somehow altered or changed with the aid of an ancient magic in the ruined city of Kalidne. In their natural state, they're virtually harmless. The final answer to the mystery lies in the ruins of Kalidne south of the fort. The armories of the vanished sorcerer king of Kalidne contain a biological weapon of Athos's earlier days, cerebral parasites, creatures previously unknown in the Dark Sun game world. In the ruins of Kalidne, the creatures are bonded to the Shakat beetles. Of course, the secret operation in the ruins of the empty city is well guarded by the warriors of House Sham. The player characters will need all of their courage and resourcefulness to put an end to the trade in parasites.
Yeah,
Very
I
epic.
that was the adventure overview in the adventure, so I thought that was pretty good. Gives a good kind of high level overview of it, and really kind of talks about the major points.
Right, and I love the fact that the adventure goes into the ruins of Kalidne. Black Flames went into the ruins of Yarmuke, and you didn't do a lot there. You saw like, okay, this is the aftermath of this place that had been razed by Hamanu many years ago, and there's a couple of ruined buildings and some stuff that has a bunch of empty rooms that you wander through, and then there's like a visitors center that tells you a little bit about how great the place used to be, and not too much else. And in this case, Kalidne is still a ruin. And of course, if you follow the Ravenloft line, you know what happened to Kalidne. But it's been taken over as this operational center by another faction. And this sort of harkens back to some of the really great adventures of early D&D, like the stuff made by Janelle Jacques, where you've got this ancient ruin or dungeon, and there might be leftover monsters or creatures and treasures from the ancient world there. And then over the years, other factions and groups move in, and they repurpose it to do their own thing in there. In the really big ones like Dark Tower and Lost Caverns of Thracia, the dungeons will have multiple different groups that have come at different points in history, and they have their own interactions or they've left their mark on the dungeons. But even in a shorter adventure like Merchant House of Amketch, the idea of like this ruin has been repurposed by another group, you get this sense that there's layers to the history of Athos, which is very cool.
Yeah, and well, actually, I was going to talk about some of the Kaladin stuff, but we'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah.
So this adventure kind of comes in four parts essentially, and the first part is the introduction. It like many of the adventures kind of defaults that the players have helped the Veiled Alliance in some way, and so it's sort of the just the easiest way to get them involved.
Right. And that's a pretty typical hook because in the core Dark Sun setting circa 1993, the Veiled Alliance is basically the only good guy faction you've got running around.
Right.
And so if you assume that the players are heroic or at least willing to do heroic things for a buck, the Veiled Alliance is a natural protagonist instigator for this sort of story. But there are other reasons that you could hook the players into this if you wanted to. They might be desperate for cash, and so they just happen to sign on with a caravan and then discover that there's this conspiracy going on. Or if your players are particularly, let's say, pragmatic, they make the renegade choices in Mass Effect. They they might be like someone from the Veiled Alliance contacts them and says, "We want your help with this," and then the PCs are like, "Oh, we're going to follow this thread and we're going to get them beetles for ourselves."
Right. Um, so this gives a sort of classic. I think it's like a trope, and some people are over it at this point, but I think it's great. It's like the everybody meeting in an inn kind of trope. This is hiring on to a caravan as a guard,
Hmm.
and you join the caravan. You meet Bezrak as well as some of the other personnel, and I like that it gives you like the like five or six people that the players or the yeah but that the players will talk to, and maybe some information that they have. It goes into what their job is going to be while they are caravan guards, and it really sets up this the rest of this, both part one and part two.
Yeah, and each of the personnel, like there's a bunch of rando guards, but the important personnel each get like 3 to 5 sentences describing them and their motivations, and then a little more about how they interact with the merchant house. And this does several really useful things. First off, it gives the players the sense that these people have interacted with each other before, because you got some people who don't trust each other or at odds with each other, or this guy wants that guy's job or whatnot. So it's not just like you have entered this caravan that has appeared out of nowhere, out of the wastes, and it has appeared from scratch, just a blank slate. But instead, these people have been caravanning for a while. They have their own goals and they have their interactions with each other. And if you learn those interactions, you can insert yourself into these social dynamics in interesting ways. Oh, this guy wants that guy's job. Well, if we promise him a way that we think he can get it, then maybe he'll help us, even if we plan not to deliver. Um, and thing two that's really cool here is that they give what each person knows about the conspiracy that the players are tracking down. So as the PCs are trying to subtly interrogate people or get them to spill stuff through befriending them or getting them drunk or reading their minds even, you know exactly what each person knows about what's going on. And if someone doesn't know, sometimes they know who does know. And so you might be like, okay, we're following the chain because this person seems like someone that we could, ask questions without raising too many suspicions. Oh, they don't know anything about the Shakat beetles, but they know that the caravan master has a smuggling compartment. Okay, well, we can't ask the caravan master directly. Who else would know about the smuggling compartment? Maybe the person who's in charge of loading all the cargo. Let's try that. So it creates this interesting dynamic of giving the players interesting little choices about who they approach, how they want to approach them. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that like some of these characters know what's going on without a doubt. And if you are playing a psionicist who does telepathy and you want to invade one of these guys' minds and just
Hmm.
see what he knows because you don't care about mental privacy, then you can. And the adventure continues because there are bigger problems of like, all right, you know that this guy arranged this caravan and he got these beetles, and who did he get them from? Now we have to get to that guy, the supplier, and follow the chain all the way back and figure out what's going on. Just having that answer doesn't solve the problem. I'm reminded of, there was a Spelljammer adventure that I think came out the year before, where they put you on a spelljamming ship with these three other passengers, and there's a mystery that happens, and each of the passengers has a specific thing going on that makes it so that you can't read their mind, and it's just
Mhm.
a fiat that they put in the adventure. This
Yeah.
person has migraines, and so you can't read their mind, and this
Right.
person is using these alchemical potions, and so you can't read their mind, and this person's wearing a medallion of thought protection or whatever, ring of mind shielding, I think, so you can't read their mind. And it was just, it read kind of like an editor read the adventure and goes, okay, what if I just use ESP on these guys? And the
Right.
editor was like, I have a problem. But in this one, it doesn't matter, because it's like, it's not just who knows and what they know, but then using that information and putting it to use. And how much do you play your hand? Like, you discover the caravan master is secretly smuggling these bioweapons for someone, and okay, if he knows that you know, there will be consequences. So
Hmm.
how long do you have to string this out?
Yeah, and I think if I recall, one of some of the people on the caravan, are probably are friendly with the caravan master, and so if they ask the wrong person, he's going to find out.
Right, right. Like there's one who doesn't know, but if you ask him about it, he goes and talks to the caravan master and says, "Hey, these people were asking about this thing."
Hmm.
Or the master provisions, like I mentioned before. Oh, we'll ask the guy who loads all the stuff on the caravan. He obviously knows about the secret compartment. That guy's named Quen. He doesn't know what's in it. He doesn't know that it's even being used right now, but he does know it exists. And if you ask him about it, he's like, "Oh yeah, of course we have a secret compartment for smuggling." What are you crazy? We're a merchant house that goes into city states, and we have to smuggle stuff past the Templars all the time. Obviously, we have a secret compartment. And the PCs are like, fantastic. He has verified our suspicions. And then this guy goes and tells the caravan master, hey, these guys were asking about smuggling. Oops.
Yeah. So what I really like about the beginning of this adventure is that it's pretty open about, kind of gives you a direction on how to get the information, but it doesn't force the characters. One of the things that I like about this is that it really, in addition to the people on the caravan, it really talks about the caravan in itself and gives
Hmm.
you a map of the Argosy. I think this was probably the first Argosy map that we had. This adventure was also put out after Dune Trader, so there's a lot of information you can use from Dune Trader, primarily about House Sham, but also about Dune Traders in general. But we get a little map of the Argosy with some little details, which I like. There's also details about just who else is on the caravan other than those kind of named NPCs.
Hmm. Hmm. And the idea is that obviously you have the PCs working with the caravan, and they're passing themselves off as mercenaries, and how successful they are in that kind of depends on how many of their cards they show. Like, if they just want to pass themselves off as dumb muscle, and then they keep their ears to the ground and they listen in on conversations and they use their powers to scry on people, they can be very successful at gathering intel. But if they show off, oh, I'm a powerful psionicist, oh, actually a druid or something like that, the NPCs are going to react appropriately and go, these aren't just common mercenaries. I better be careful how I behave around them. And then you get to of course put some threats on the caravan, and make use of the Argosy layout and whatnot by having random encounters as the thing is traveling, and that lets the PCs see how the NPCs react. But it also means, like, am I going to use all my powers to defend the caravan and tip my hand that I'm like a sixth level druid with powerful spells and some sort of hidden agenda, or do I just try to pass myself as a guy with a wooden sword? That's what I am.
Yeah, so that all kind of happens in part two. So part one is kind of over quickly with basically talk of like the guard duty, and then all of a sudden we're into the smuggler's cache and um, the camp tales, where you kind of really learn more about, like you were talking about earlier, more about these characters and what they know.
Hmm.
Um, part two, oh, one of the things before I jump into that, uh, starting with part two, each part has a summary, and each has a following the script section that kind of talks about what to do if the players go off script. Because it is so kind of open, players could do anything. So you kind of have to be ready for anything. But it prepares you a bit, just in case maybe they do something slightly different that the authors had thought about, and so they gave some advice there.
Yeah, super useful. It's short but sweet. It often is like, okay, here's the biggest monkey wrench that is likely to come up. Like, there's a part in the adventure where the PCs get captured because it's a Dark Sun adventure. It wouldn't be complete without that. And the writer, Richard Baker says, okay, your PCs might scream and holler about being captured. Here's what you do if they manage to evade capture and you want to let them do so instead of like forcing their hand and railroading the adventure. Here's what you do to get them to keep doing the adventure even though they didn't get captured. And you skip this part and you give them this motivation, adventure proceeds. Super well done.
Yeah, so it kind of assumes that the PCs are going to find the cache, and once they find it, it's like, okay, well, what do we do with this now? So they're not really looking to sort of stop the trade of um, this one run of these beetles they find, and so they've got to figure out what to do after that.
Right. You've confirmed the contraband exists. These guys are carrying it. And now you're like, okay, we got to follow it back to its source if we're going to put this to a stop. You don't want to just blow up this caravan. You want to stop the entire trade in Shekat beetles. And that means you got to keep following it. So if part one is your introduction to these NPCs, part two is where you have a set of encounters with these NPCs. You have the trade stop, which can be at Fort Glamis or South Ladopolis. There's not really any info given about those locations. It's sort of assumed that this is just a like a stop and refuel sort of situation, and that you'll check out Dune Trader or one of the other supplements if you want to flesh out the location, and then you get into an ambush and a Gith raid. And it's a very straightforward but effective use of Gith because we know from the core book, Gith are your like staple monstrous humanoid, 3-hit die, comes in large groups, raiders, opportunists, attack caravans. You can talk to them, but they're not inclined to be friendly. And uh, very much, if you're like a mid to high level group, they've got that sort of crunch all you want, we'll make more feeling. So you throw a massive wave of Gith at the caravan, more than the PCs are likely to handle, and ambush proceeds from there.
Yeah, one of the things that is in here also is not only just the Gith, but there's a defiler, and like you said, there's so I think there's supposed to be like
Yeah.
50 Gith. So yeah, it should definitely overwhelm them. However, as players are want to do, sometimes that doesn't happen, and I'll talk about that later when we talk about how we've run this game. And so yeah, we'll just say that for now.
But one thing I'll note is that they mention using battle system skirmish rules, but at this point in the line's development, like battle system stuff is it's sort of included because it's expected to be included in Dark Sun, but they keep all of the regular D&D stats. And like when the Gift Defiler shows up and casts Web and Lightning Bolt, your party's going to be really hurting. You don't need any battle system to do that. Um, the uh, the expectation is that the players are going to beat the Gith and force them to retreat. And this is again a typical like earlier edition D&D where instead of the enemies all fighting to the death, you might be getting attacked by what seems to be a more powerful force. But if the heroes manage to heroically, I feel like Austin Powers, smash a bunch of the invaders and show like we're really strong and you might beat us, you're going to take horrifying losses, then their morale breaks and they run away. And so you don't have to just destroy everyone to finish the encounter. You just have to convince the monsters that it's not worth fighting you.
Yeah, it's a great fight just with so many enemies. It can be tough. So if you are running this, definitely you don't have to track 50 Gith. Just use them in groups. If you've got swarm rules, you can use those.
Hmm.
I know that's good for fifth edition. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to use minion type
Hmm.
mechanics where you can be like, okay, I've got this whole group of Gith here, and they're going to function like minions, and they'll swarm at a PC, and they can seriously hurt you, but you can take them down quickly if you're like a gladiator using a specialty weapon, or you've got a preserver with a fireball. Um, Another interesting note is that the caravan has like 13 outriders that are their guards, and they're led by the outrider leader, and the when the Gith attack, um, the Outriders immediately run away unless the PCs rally them. So, like, if you're playing a fighter in Dark Sun, fighters are supposed to be war leaders who have like military training and do siege warfare and lead stuff in battle. And it's specifically called out here. The guards run away unless the PCs rally them. And it's like, oh, that's great. It's a little moment for your character to shine in a way that is specific to their class.
Yeah, yeah, good noticing that. I don't think I've noticed that.
Yeah.
So after they win, they get to where they're going, which is this. It's a small village. On the original map, it is an oasis of red obelisk, and this kind of gives some information in the box text as well as in the. And I guess there's not much in the rest of it, but the box text gives some.
Hmm.
And here, it does one of the things that I think people have sort of no longer really lean on, which is to sort of drug players and knock them out, or characters,
Right.
I could say, maybe not players. Um, and so Bezrak gives a cask of drugged wine, and it's assuming that the characters will drink it and will make a -2 to their poison save. This is second edition, of course, or fall unconscious for several hours. It does kind of say like, well, if people don't make it, then don't make it kind of impossible to get away. If players are actually saying like, I'm not going to drink it or whatever, and they're keeping their wits about them, kind of let them escape and just let them uh, help from afar.
Yeah, yeah, it's very cool because like you've got okay, it's the typical oh no, the PCs are going to be captured scene, but like I mentioned before, this time it's not a fiat accompli. Some of you can get away in order to try and help the others. This puts a little load on the DM because you're splitting scenes between what's going on with the captives versus what's going on with the people who are still liberated. But an interesting twist that you could do with this is like if you decide that PCs who are captive are not in a position to really do anything to effectuate their freedom and they need the other group to release them, is that you do this scene, whoever escapes escapes, and then the other PCs who got captured switch to secondaries on their character tree, join up with the other guys and rescue their own characters.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a great way to handle that. So that ends part two. Now we get into part three, where the PCs are assumed to be prisoners of Bezrak and what you soon find out to be some House Sham people. So they're sort of, just kind of stuck there at Red Obelisk um, while all the other Amketch people are basically turned into slaves and are being made to load and unload the caravan.
Right. Um, and this is also where House Sham starts coming in for the PCs. The folks who come to capture them, and then the folks who take control of the caravan are warriors working for House Sham. So PCs who know a little bit about Merchant House heraldry or who are Dune traders themselves might recognize this, and that's their first inkling that okay, this House Amketch, this is a front. And it's House Sham that's behind all of this.
Yeah, and initially the Sham leader is Agristes, and initially he comes forward and kind of says, "Let's," or Bezrak says, "Let's kill them." Agristes is like, "No, no, they will. They'll be worth more if we sell them into slavery." And so
Right.
the characters are sort of spared, but they also kind of talk about the Beatles. So this is kind of where is the it's the really the first inkling of what's actually happening behind the scenes with the Beatles.
Right. Um, so as this happens, there's sort of a short argument, and then the Giths show up again, and they meet with the Sham warriors, and there's sort of a discussion between Agristes and Bezrak about, okay, do we want to take these people all the way to Nibene in order to sell them, but or do we give them over to the Gith because it turns out they've been working with the Gith this whole time. Um, and of course, the PCs presumably killed a whole bunch of the Gith in the last scene, so the Gith are more than happy to see you again. Um, and so if you are captives, then you get handed off to the Gith, who drag you off to their lair. If you are not captives, then you're presumably watching this happen from a safe distance or with clairvoyance or whatnot, and then following the trail of the caravan and then seeing where the Gith split off with their prisoners, dragging them along. Hope you got a ranger in the group, and you track the Gith back to their lair in order to try and rescue the PCs who have been caught.
Yeah, one time running this, none of the PCs were were captured, and they were in order to get them to still go after the Gith. I said that some of the other some of the other caravan members were sold to the Gith, and the PCs had liked some of them, and so that gave them some impetus to go after the Gith.
Yeah, perfect twist, because that's why you establish all these characters in the first scene, where they are real people and some of them are helpful and some of them are friendly to the PCs. And if the PCs like them and are like, oh, these people didn't know what was going on and weren't out to mess with us, now they might feel a sense of obligation to be like, oh, we managed to escape, but these people didn't. We got to do something about it.
Hmm. So they get taken to the Gith camp, which it gives a description of, and then you're sort of assumed that somehow they're going to break out.
Right.
Really doesn't give any more details about that I saw. It's just like somehow they're going to get out.
Yeah, but I expect that, like, it would have been nice to have, three or four, like, here are some possibilities. There's a Gith guard that gets drunk that you can exploit, or there's a way that a thief can climb up a wall of a canyon side and then get out of the captive area or something like that. Um, but it's really more of just sort of going, okay, you are all being held in cages in this tribe of 80 Gith, and they throw you into one side and build a big bonfire in the middle of the village, and then they start getting drunk. And eventually, the guards all do get drunk, and you're bound and gagged, and you have to like slip out of your bindings or break them or something like that. And also, nobody that's watching you is psionic, but at this point in the adventure, you've been infested with cerebral parasites, because one of the things they do when they capture you is they get you bitten by the shakat beetles. So if you are trying to like telekinetically escape your bonds or something like that, you got problems. And of course, spellcasters can't use somatic components. So the assumption seems to be like, okay, the strong dude in the party is going to snap his bonds when the
Right.
bend bars lift gates roll, and then set about freeing everyone else while the guards are really, really drunk late in the evening. But there are maybe other possibilities. A dexterous rogue could slip out of the bonds, or maybe a clever character figures out, hey, this part of the cage still has like the rough edge, and I can rub my leather thong against it until it snaps, or something like that. As seen in every adventure movie with captives.
Right.
Um, and the Gith are pretty careless, but there's 80 of them. So even though they're drunk and they're careless, you don't exactly want to raise the alarm at this point. And once you get out of here, um, you have uh, a whole bunch more journeying to do, and there are going to be other things that you're going to run into in the desert. So just escaping is merely like recovering from one setback. Um, there's also a very small suggestion that says if the PCs are having a lot of trouble, you can either help them by having a couple of additional NPCs thrown in as prisoners, and one of them is like smuggled in a knife or manages to get out of their bonds or whatever, or you have a tribe of elves attack the Gith and throw them into confusion. Um, and if the PCs fail to escape in spite of all of this, then they go on the bonfire and become the next town
Right.
deceased. Go, move to your
TPK.
next characters, please.
Right. And so once they do escape, assuming they do, you've got a desert journey ahead of you. It gives a little bit of just an overview of journeying through the desert without really any details. There is one encounter with some tembo, a pack of tembo, which is cool, and it's sort of assumed that the characters are going to go after the caravan and follow the caravan, and so once once the characters catch up with the caravan and want to kind of overtake it, then there is a short section on that where they are assumed to again win and get some information. They find out that either they find out that they need to go back to Balak, or if they kind of don't find what they need, they get a bit of information from this woman named Aljara. So she has a little bit more information that kind of again guides them to Balak.
Now, all of this does have one unanswered question that always looms large in my mind, which is what happens to all the PC stuff? Because if you've just escaped from captivity in a Gith camp and now you're striking out across the desert, they mention in the rules like you can do a 10-hour marching day and you still probably need to forage for food and water. I mean, we're acknowledging that the PCs probably weren't thrown in the prison wearing all their armor and their gear and carrying all their weapons and spell books and things like that. So,
Right.
so where's your stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And it like you could make a sensible argument either way. Oh, the guys that run the caravan kept it, and then they just gave you to the Gith, and they're like, "Oh, let's root through this stuff, and if any of it's valuable, we'll sell it when we get to Nibene or to Balak or wherever, and anything that's not, we'll just dump in the desert." But you could also make an argument that they just like throw all of your stuff into a sack or whatever, and then when they push you over to the Gith, they kick the sack over and go, "This was theirs too. Um, it's your problem now. You might recognize it because that dude used that impaler to kill three of your friends. Have fun." It really depends on how you want to play it out. If you are feeling kind, you make it so that their stuff is somewhere in the Gith encampment, and this is a great chance for rogue PCs to have to sneak over and get some of the gear and bring it back to the rest of the party so they're ready to make their escape. Uh, if you want more of that harsh Dark Sun feel, you say, no, the caravan guys kept your stuff. You're in the Gith camp, and before you break out into the desert, how much stuff can you steal from the Gith so that you
Right.
can survive out in the desert? Because otherwise, an
Mm-hmm.
encounter with four Tembo is going to be extremely bad for you, and it's going to be especially bad for preservers who have lost their spell implements and have no way to prepare spells anymore for the rest of their lives. That sounds
Right.
awful. So instead, you put that pressure on them by saying, you got to get back to the caravan. They got your stuff. Steal some things, just enough gear from the Gith so that you can make it across the desert, but you don't want to linger too long or you're going to get caught and then they're all going to start waking up and you're in real trouble. So you
Nice. Yeah,
get some
that's
nice tension out
that's
of that.
great points there. So the next part is part four, and it is assumed that the players get back to Balak, and from there they can either um, kind of find out that there is an informant, um, and they can kind of go report to the Veiled Alliance or to House Amketch.
Yeah. Pretty straightforward there. At this point, it's like you're just closing the loop. You know that House Amketch is just a front for Sham. You know that Sham is moving the Shakat beetles. You know that the Shakat beetles, once you've done a little investigating, are coming through Fort Melidor and initially coming out of the ruins of Kalidne. So you just need to follow it to its logical conclusion, but you're getting the last bits of info to lead you along that route. Another alternative that I like is if the PCs don't go to confront Marius Amketch, and they're not working for the Veiled Alliance, and so you don't wind up meeting the Veiled Alliance contact.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Sham informant, Yarnak, and you get directed to this guy either way.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, turn this into a job for a bard in the group. All right, you have to go and do intel gathering, and you're going to go visit different places in Balak, schmooze some people, make some friends, maybe poison a couple of people and then offer them antidotes if they answer your questions, and eventually get pointed to Yarnak. So it can be a nice opportunity for that kind of a character to get a time to shine.
Definitely. So like you said, people, you've just got to find the information, and that primary information is that all of this is going on from Fort Melador, and there are like four different ways that you can do it. As you were talking about Yarnak, the Yarnak encounter also has like um, he's basically going against House Sham, and House Sham doesn't like that, and so they sent some assassins. And the assassin is a wizard who's actually not statted out on here. I mean, it just
Oops.
says they're a seventh level defiler, I guess, with a couple of guards. But what it does stat out is the Garolith. So this is another place
Right.
where, where there's a demon, a Yugoloth here in Dark Sun.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the Geharolith is actually sent to assassinate Yarnak, and the aforementioned unnamed seventh level defiler has a discharge spell scroll, and presumably that spell scroll was how the Geraleth was summoned. So
Mm-hmm.
you could make the argument of, oh, this was magic from the ancient world that the defiler acquired, and some sort of unknown spell from an earlier age, or whatnot. But any way you cut it, yeah, we've got another fiend of the outer planes that has been drawn to Athos by magic, and it explicitly tells you to go to the MC8 Outer Planes Appendix. So, wow, oh, I guess it always can get worse, right? On Athos, there's no escape to heaven, there's no angels to help you, but there are demons.
And the demons can come in, right?
Oh yeah,
So Yarnak kind of points people to this House Sham warehouse, and this section is kind of like a little dungeon crawl. There's a little house that's got looks like six kind of major areas with some sub areas. So there's really like I don't know 12 areas or so. Players got to break into that and then find a secret way down, and then there's like this kind of sewer level, which also is sort of like a dungeon crawl.
yeah. It's neat because most dungeons in the rare dungeons in Dark Sun tend to be short and sweet, and this definitely fits that feeling. But of course, it's in an actual warehouse of House Sham, so it's a dungeon in an urban setting, more or less. The other neat thing about the Yarnak encounter there is this is like a traditional mystery trope. This guy is a middleman along the chain of the conspiracy, and now the conspirators have caught wind that someone is sniffing around, so they're cleaning up their loose ends, and they
Mm-hmm.
send a demon to kill the guy. And of course, the PCs save him, and now he's going to tell them everything because them taking out the conspirators is his best chance to stay alive. So
Right.
it's really nice to see that's sort of like, oh, this is an old trope that shows up in detective movies and novels and things like that. And oh, we have mined it and dropped it into a Dark Sun adventure as well. And it works really well here. Um, so you get into uh, the House of Sham. You've got a lot of problems here now because, in addition to going through this mini dungeon, you are breaking into a legitimately owned Sham warehouse, which means that House Sham can just go to the Templars and say, "Hey, we've got thieves in our warehouse. Could you please come and arrest them?" And that's a real problem for you because if you start a fight with the Templars in Balak, you better not be planning to come back to that city ever again.
Yeah. So once you get into the underground, the actual um, storehouse of the Beatles, you find a lot more information. You find um, where people are kind of putting together packages. I think there is the Beetle chamber, um, and there are other kind of secret offices, and within the secret offices, you can find some information that leads you to Fort Melador and Calidne. One of the things that there's a pay chest that is locked with a fire trap. It's got some gold in it, a good amount of gold and silver. So characters will will definitely gain some money if they find everything.
Yeah, and if they had lost their gear previously, they're going to need it.
Right.
Um, so once you have all of the info, you're like, okay, we got to go to Fort Melidor, and you do a quick desert journey, and they've basically written a few encounters. One of them is a very straightforward 4 spider cactus while you are at the bottom of a rocky escarpment, and there's the like it's you're basically trying to set up your campsite. You're looking for a safe part to area to camp, and then there's a small hill with some cactus, and you're like, oh great, the hill will give us shelter from the wind, and the cactus will give us some fuel. And it turns out they're spider cactus. So as soon as you get close enough to them to harvest them, shink, you get shot with one of the needles that has the trailing line that reels you in like spider silk. Um, and this is very straightforward encounter. Spider cactus are not super dangerous to a well-armed party of 5 or 6 fourth to seventh level characters, unless you get really unlucky on your paralysis saving throws.
Right.
Um, yeah, so this is more. I think it almost feels more like an environmental underscoring of nowhere is safe. You know, you're
Yeah.
about to rest, and then, even the cactus is out to kill us.
Right.
The other encounter, though, I really enjoy,
Hmm.
and this is Mothgar, the giant gladiator. He's a giant mercenary, I guess, not a gladiator. My bad. But this character is amazing. He's this greedy giant mercenary, and he gets offered a contract by House Sham to track down the PCs and kill them. Um, he is remarkably dim-witted. So if the PCs just like straight up lie to his face or say something ridiculously contradictory, he is immediately confused. Um, like he could come up and go, "Ha! I've been looking for you. I have been sent to capture or kill you for my employer." And you sort of play up that he's got that thick sort of giantish slow moving mind. And the PCs go, who are you looking for exactly? Well, I'm looking for you, Stug Two Blades. And you go, I'm not Stug Two Blades. I just look like him, but I saw him on the road headed to Draj just 2 days ago. Yeah, going north along the Silt Estuary. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess I got mixed up. And he just immediately goes off that direction. But
Yeah,
in
it is
addition,
always a great encounter. Every time I've run this players love this. The image by Baxa is fantastic too, and it
yeah,
shows his weapon, which is a giant ballista as a crossbow.
right? Yeah, it's amazing. So he's got a ballista. He can throw rocks because he's a giant. He's resistant to psionics, but you don't need psionics in order to mess with his head. He has a giant stone mace, and the amount of damage he can do is enormous. He's got 15 hit dice. You're really not supposed to fight this guy. You're supposed to trick him. Um, but if you do manage to defeat him, he's worth a big chunk of experience points. Um, but in addition, he's got a sack of 8 live Erdloos that he's
Yeah.
carrying over his other shoulder. He's got a ballista in one hand and a sack of Erdloos in the other. Dude's literally carrying a sack of chickens for dinner.
Yep.
It's just hilarious. And this character this character I think is just a great little bit of flavor, and it's a quirky encounter that you can run it either way. You can run it straight and he's a serious threat to the PCs in a fight, or you can run it for the comedy value and be like coming off of the spider cacti where they're not really a threat, but they underscore that you never get a moment's rest, everything is dangerous. And then you run into this guy and you're like, this guy looks really dangerous, and then you're like, oh gosh, we're running this guy circles around him. Like he may be a giant, but he sure isn't one intellectually. And then you can play it for a little bit of comedy. It's a nice tension breaker.
Yeah, and even if the PCs misdirect him, he kind of realizes what happens a day or two later and catches up with them. At that point, he will try to use his crossbow and just kind of keep at range. And it says that he'll stay back just firing, and if he uses all of his bolts, um, it doesn't really. It just says until he runs out of bolts. So does that mean he leaves after that or not? But if the PCs close with him, then he just gets into melee.
Right, giant stone mace land. He's got 12 iron-headed javelins that he fires from the ballista. Of course, any good PC party is going to immediately be rushing this guy and not going to give him a chance to use all of them. But ironically, like his Thaco is way worse with the ballista than it is with his stone mace. So, but PCs have no way of knowing that. Um, so yeah, ultimately you're going to have to deal with this guy. But one of the great things is that like if you fool him the first time, you might try and fool him again, and it says, if you fool me once, you can't get fooled again in the text. But um, now the PCs know that he's on their tail, and they're like, "Oh, we're probably going to see this guy again." Chekhov's giant. He will return, and you better be prepared to deal with him. But this is great because if the PCs are smart, they prepare for the second encounter. And they're like, okay, what can we do? We could lay some traps. We could have the druid use an entangle spell. We could try and ambush this guy in a location where we can get ranged attacks from above on him, where it's harder for him to hit us with the ballista because we have cover or something like that. So, in addition to the initial encounter being really funny, the follow-up encounter really rewards players who think and are on the ball and make preparations for their problems.
So after they deal with the giant, it's assumed they get to Fort Melidor. This is always I think because of this adventure, this is just one of my favorite little forts. I just love all the characters here. But one of the funny things, at least unless you can tell me otherwise, Jesse, it seems like there is a sort of a little mistake here in this Fort Melidor part, because it talks about when the players are observing the fort from the outside, they see a patrol of Sham soldiers stationed in Caladay that appear, and after the patrol departs, the PCs can enter. So it talks about that, and then later at the end it says, like, what are you going to do next? It says if the PCs follow the elves, continue with elven caravan, but there's no mention of elves prior to that.
Right. Yeah, there is one elf. There's the elven bard,
Right.
who like knows a little bit about Sham delivering packages a la UPS, but that's it. But yeah, there is no other mention of an elven caravan. The only other reference that I can think of is the one way back in the Gith camp where it says if the PCs are lagging on figuring out how to get out, have an elven tribe attack the Gith.
Mm-hmm.
And and I get the feeling that there might have been a thread in there of there being sort of a side scene of an elf caravan that happens to be shadowing the same route that the House Amketch caravan does, and that they fight the Gith, and that they're following the same route as the Amketch caravan when the PCs get out, and that you could cross paths with them many times, and that this presumably for length got cut from the
Mm-hmm.
final draft, and this feels like a hanging thread that got left.
Definitely. So if you want to, make a little encounter with these elves, you can do that, because in the next part, if
Right.
you go to the elven caravan, it kind of gives you some details about these elves and what they're doing, and so you could use that to sort of seed an encounter in Fort Melidor.
Right. So we've got the entire stats for this caravan of like 22 elves and their war leader and their chief and whatnot, but no context for where they actually lie in the story. Um, all right. It's something for the DM to decide what to do. If you don't want to use it, you just ignore that page. If you do, you can flush it out or make it as important as it needs to be for giving the players like a plausible way into the fort or a little extra help if they're caught in the desert.
Yeah.
And that these elves are portrayed as being neutral, aligned. So presumably they're somewhat reasonable, and like all Athasian elves, they're probably suspicious of the PCs. But if you're willing to make a deal with them, they'll probably make a deal with you.
Yeah. So the whole point of the elven caravan um, and Fort Melidor is basically to get just more information that all of this stuff is happening in Caladnay, and so it's kind of gives two different angles of learning that. So the
Right.
next part, it's kind of assumed that they go from there to Caladnay, and this is we get a good map of Caladnay. I don't think in Black Flames was there a map of Yarmuk?
Yes, but it's really, really simple.
Okay, yeah.
It,
So
it's it's just like a big desert area, and then it's like there's a sinkhole here, there's the ruins of a tower here, the visitor center's here, the palace is here, and there's a gift cave over here, and
mhm.
then it's just sand.
Yeah. So the one that we get here is also pretty simple, but it shows you the roads and it shows you the wall and the gorge, and then the central palace and arena and stuff like that. So it's uh, it's a good little map. In addition, recently June has kind of remade this map in a kind of modern style, which is cool. And then he's also, I think, going in and like adding buildings so like you could see what it used to look like.
Right. And again, harkening back to our Black Flames discussion, I really like that the idea of, okay, this is a ruined city that has something to say about what Athos used to be and how did its downfall come about. And even if the PCs never see most of that, the DM having that information and being able to dole it out based on the PC's how they interact with it is really useful for giving a sense that this is more than just a couple chunks of rock out in the desert. This was once a living, vibrant place, and it was destroyed because of the terrible things that befell Athos and the awful choices that its people made. In the case of Yarmuke, that was the war between them and Ulrich, of course. Um, and Black Flames doesn't do a lot to teach us about what was this place like before, what were its people like, what role did it play in the city states, and giving PCs hooks to explore that if they're interested is useful. It's always good for the DM to have this information available. If the PCs want it, then it's there. And so having June's extra work on this does the same thing for Calidne. And of course, we get a lot more information about Calidne from Ravenloft because the Dark Powers whisked it off to uh, the domain of Ravenloft and left behind just the shell of the former city. But seeing what this place was in Athos can be really cool for PCs who are interested in that sort of thing, or for ones who are really motivated by the sense of what went wrong here and how do we stop ourselves from making the same mistakes in the future.
Yeah, so the book gives you a few details. I kind of feel like it is similar to Black Flames in that like it really doesn't tell you much about the city. It just gives you some basic ruins. Four different locations: the North Gate, the Palace, the Arena, and the Ziggurat. However, for those that really paid attention, Kaladin was also featured in Forbidden Lore, which was released in 1992. And so Kaladin, for those who don't know, is this cool crossover with Ravenloft. And so you could get some more information if you go check out that. There was also a release on Dragon number 202. Sorry, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry, Dungeon number 190, an Ion Dark Sun, that had fourth edition kind of rebooting of Caladnay.
Right. And um, there's even been a fifth edition reboot of Caladne by a third party developer um, that you can get through DM's Guild if you're really interested in the exploring the setting. And that's got like some cool bones on it. The idea of the sorcerer monarchs are terrible people. How much worse do you have to be to attract the notice of the dark powers of Ravenloft and for them to
Right.
go, you're really the worst of the worst. You are the weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, the this module though, like you said, very sparse about what's going on in Calidne, and I think that's largely because they're just focused on, okay, the ziggurat is where the mastermind is doing all of the stuff, taking the ancient cylinders of cerebral parasites that Khalid Ma had stashed away eons ago and turning them into bioweapons. And so it's like, okay, that's where the adventure is, so that's where we're going to focus our design bucks.
Right.
And I get the sense that like the flipbook adventures were made to be pretty small. These are the equivalent of the 32-page softcover adventures that came out for first and second edition D&D for many years. They're not designed to be a complete exploration of the campaign setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Dragon's Crown was a real aberration when it comes out, and it's just thick and heavy, big books. Um, and I feel like um, there probably would have been great room for there to be a source book had the line survived, just about lost cities and ruins, and do a source book that's like, here's a chapter about each of the lost cities or ruins that are like major places on the map, and then a few sections on some of the smaller or lesser known ones. So it's like, here's a chapter on Yarmuke, here's a chapter on Kalidne, here's a little bit about the Mud Palace, and so on. And so you go
Hmm.
down the list about all these places. But was never to be. Who knows? Perhaps the um, Pristine Tower group will get around to it.
Hmm. Yes. So I think also June is doing a lot of stuff. He's got a whole campaign that's sort of based on it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I think we'll see some good stuff here at some point.
Now,
So you
yeah,
know,
there
it's
is
kind
a really good dramatic climax here because you find the guy that's the mastermind behind this, Tethrides, and he's trying to escape as you're fighting your way through the interior of this ziggurat. And you can go in multiple directions. There's main doors. There's a secret door at the top. There's a big crack in the middle of it because it's old, and so on. Um, and you want to get through. It's this ancient ziggurat that's been inhabited by different groups over the years. So there's graffiti in there. Um, there's a secret door that was left open, and another one that was not. So you really get the sense that this place has been inhabited sequentially over the years. There's a small number of guards, more if the NPCs know you're coming. So it pays for you to be stealthy because you know that there's a conspiracy here that's trying to protect their business. And then as Tethrides tries to flee from you, he moves up toward the top of the ziggurat. So it's highly likely that your final confrontation with the mastermind is going to be at the top of the ziggurat, as it should be.
of right. So you know the fight with Tethrides can be really good. He's a defiler. You know there are some, I think they're, what are they, guards,
Yeah, he's got a
mule and
couple of
sham warriors.
mule
So
warriors.
yep. So you know, especially if you're playing like fifth edition, um, having one enemy is usually not that great. So I would suggest, you know, having some guards run up there with him just to give him a little bit more protection, unless he's got, you know, maybe he's got some kind of summoning or something like that. Otherwise, single creatures seem to go down pretty quick in fifth edition.
Yeah, it's him and two elite guards normally, but there's a note that if any Sham warriors escaped and warned the camp, 15 more arrive at the base of the ziggurat and climb up. So that's like you can just sort of fiat that and be like, okay, the PCs start the fight, and you got Tethrides behind his two elite warriors, and you make the warriors into these giant sacks of hit points, and then you just take out 15 counters and put them down at the bottom of the ziggurat, and each round they're moving toward the PCs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, we're gonna have to deal with these guys at some point. So now it's like you're encouraging the PCs to take risks in the combat. Can we finish off these guys really fast and then run down the other side of the ziggurat? Or is our archer going to start picking off these guys as they're coming up? Or maybe the preserver gets a really well placed fireball and can kill some of them so that we can manage them when they get here. And if things go badly and the dice aren't rolling your way, you could get into this real morass where you've got the boss and a couple of his guards and then these other dudes flanking you, and now you've been totally surrounded. Very tense.
Definitely. So after they take out Tethrides, they um, it's sort of assumed that they, you know, find the last of the parasites and the beetles and that they destroy them. Now, I could see some groups like, no, we're not going to destroy these. We're going to, you know, use them. I haven't had a group do that yet, but I could definitely see some groups doing that.
It mentions specifically that if you open the cylinder, the brass cylinder that's got the cerebral parasites embedded in wax in it, it immediately infests you, and then a plague of the parasites eventually spreads over the entire region. So, like, if you let the beetles out of the bottle, it is going to have huge ramifications for your campaign down the line. There's also two elements in this encounter that are almost kind of played for comedy, kind of like the giant before that I like. Um, One is that when you're fighting Tethrides and he is like um, trying to disarm you, if he thinks he's got you won, you know, to surrender or whatnot, or if he thinks that you're gonna defeat him, he'll grab one of the cylinders and he threatens to throw it to the ground and break it and unleash this plague upon the world. And if you call his bluff, he throws the cylinder, but it's made of brass, and it just goes doing and bounces, and it doesn't break. And he's
Yeah.
like, "Dang it!" And then number two is they actually have rules for falling down the side of the ziggurat, and the ziggurat is 11 10-foot steps that are really steep, and you have to make dexterity saving throws as you're climbing down the steps. Um, and you have to make a save if you're hit while you're coming up the steps. And if you fail, then you fall down a step and then you roll again. So you're making a series of rolls to see if your character literally bounces down the steps of the ziggurat as you
Right.
fall, oof, ah, oof, ah, oof, ah, oof, taking damage each time. And it's like humiliating but also comical. And they mentioned that like if one of the PCs surrenders at some point, Tetrades kicks him off of the ziggurat. And so you know what happens.
Right.
And I could imagine you pulling a "This is Sparta" on Tetrades himself too, which could be also very satisfying.
uh, Talking about him throwing the container, you can also use that as sort of like a dramatic moment, right? Like maybe
Hmm.
one of the players dives for the container, and just they need a roll or whatever you want to do, but they kind of do that classic grab the container just as it's about to hit the ground.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Give him a chance to really save the day at the end there.
Hmm.
So that the bioweapon isn't released. There's also a quick note that like if you defeat Tetrades, that most of the guards will flee after you kill him, but you can expand the adventure by sketching out a map of the camp yourself in the ruined arena, and you give the players the opportunity to mount a final raid against House Sham. And it's like it's sad that there wasn't enough space for them to actually do this in the adventure. I feel like this is a call out for someone to actually write this, because that is a very cool follow up on the heels of this. It's like Tetrades was the mastermind who had figured out how to weaponize these creatures, but Sham was the ones that were bankrolling it, and they gotta pay.
Right. I did that in one of my campaigns.
Nice.
Yeah, ran that arena battle. So that is sort of the conclusion. It kind of talks about how you can get more work from Marius Amketch or the Veiled Alliance, and how you can easily kill the beetles and all that stuff. So you can kind of wrap it up. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a whole lot of reward other than sort of them um, finding things along the way.
Right. And if things went really poorly in the Gith camp, you may have lost all of your gear anyway.
Right.
Again. Um, but like uh, Tetrades, Um, he's in over in the background book along with all the other NPCs. And he's an 8th level defiler. He's got a ring of protection. He's got a +1 quarterstaff. He's got a couple of potion fruits, a wand of lightning, and of course his own spell book. So there's a little bit of magical loot for you there.
Hmm.
Um, and since Marius Amketch was sort of an unwitting participant in all of this, if you get through this and you prove to him, hey, this wasn't us, House Sham was using you and whatnot, maybe you show him one of the cylinders with the psionic beetles or something as tangible proof. Um, he may very well stake you and be like, oh, okay, well, this is going to help my business now because my caravan is no longer going to be used for this illegal contraband in order to cover for Sham, and I can get back to legitimate trade without risking drawing down the wrath of the Templars and whatnot. And so potentially he could reward you. Um, so presumably you could get some mundane gear off of Tetrades' elite guards. They're
Sure.
elite mule warriors. They're using various weapons and stuff. And maybe you have a ballista for your half giant.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, it's pretty light on the treasure. But that's the way some players or some DMs like it.
Sure. So I've ran this a few times now. I ran it by the book, years ago, and then I ran bits and pieces of it during a 4E adventure. And recently, I made it a higher level and kind of started in tier instead of Balic. Uh, Kind of more Marius Amketch directly got the characters involved, and it was really more of a side quest since the characters were on their way to the Deadlands for Seekers of the Deadlands, the adventure in that book.
Very nice.
And so, I kind of changed things around, but more or less it was the same. And just instead of going from Balic on, they were coming from Tyr. Um, the Gith ambush happened outside of
Hmm.
Alfric. I actually have a cool map that I used, and I've got a screenshot somewhere of the
Uh,
combat because it was on, on virtual. It was on Fantasy Grounds, and so it's this massive combat with, all of these Gith all around and the characters on top of the Argosy and stuff. It was a really cool screenshot.
got to get a link to that.
Yeah,
Um, I did raid this for some ideas. I haven't run the adventure as is, but I ran an intro group for some people who had never played Dark Sun before and were like, "Well, what's this about?" And they were mostly 5e players, so I did a 5e game. It was just a simple caravan trip with an attack by Gith raiders and a defiler and some shenanigans involving the caravan. And a large chunk of it was very Canterbury Tales as they got to meet all of the people that were traveling with or working in the caravan and discover their stories and their personalities. Each person had a chance to sort of share their story in the campfire tales segment and whatnot. So it was sort of like an abbreviated chunk of the first part of the adventure as a nice intro for some new players to Dark Sun.
nice.
Um, Overall, I like this adventure. I think it captures some of the really good Dark Sun tropes of like we got overland caravan travel, we got Gith raiders, we got a ruined city that has been co-opted by a secret group that's doing shady stuff. We potentially have run-ins with Templars, but if you're quiet or you bribe them, then you don't have to worry about it. A lot of really solid notes in this one.
Yeah, this is one of those adventures that I think most people like. I love it. I've run it, like I said, multiple times, so this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, yeah, I'm inclined to definitely put it up there as one of the better adventures of the setting.
All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Jesse, where can we find you online?
I am trackable on both Twitter and now Blue Sky as at Jesse Heinig. And how about you, Robert?
You can find me at athos.org on the arena. You can find me on the Facebook Dark Sun group. You can find me at radu at athos.org if you want to email. I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Blue Sky yet, but I would love to get on there. I've
Oh,
heard
I'll send you
about
an
some
invite.
good things. Thanks. Um, and I'm on Mastodon at, what am I, Radu76, I think, at tabletop.social.
Huh, you're everywhere.
All right. Well, thanks, Jesse. That was fun.
That was a fun one. Yeah. Thanks very much.
All right. Bye bye.
Goodbye, everyone.